This is another Read Me Something reward for Reich E. Spore's Patreon. We are reading from my Oz-based novel, Polychrome, Chapter 33. The gray-brown stone rose high above our heads as we traversed the barren canyon, only the unnatural flatness of the surface under our feet hinting that this was a pathway and not one of 1,000 other arroyos in the rugged, almost lifeless mountains of the Nome territory. "So, are we going to run into a giant with a hammer?" I asked. Ruggedo chuckled. "Nay, Lord Erik. Even though the guardian machines I had were somewhat more fearsome than your writer portrayed, still, eventually it was decided that they were more the cause of trouble than its solution. I suspect you can guess why." I hadn't thought about it before, but with that hint, I laughed, the sound echoing down the dead canyon. "Two reasons, I'd say." Zenga's laugh echoed after my own. "Oh, of course. Such a wonder would draw many to see it, to think of how it worked, perhaps to try to pass so they could seek out its creators, to build more for their own cities. And," I continued, "would also be a challenge, like a gauntlet thrown down, a dare. And you'd have a lot of people, young and stupid, or simply the sort that like to take on any challenge, come here just to prove they could get past your sleepless mechanical guards." "You know your people's foibles well," Ruggedo agreed, a faint smile tugging at his beard which I could just make out under the hood. He hadn't pulled it up quite so far as he did for his standard penitent disguise. I suppose he figured it didn't matter. Something caught my eye. I glanced in that direction, but saw nothing. But something seemed to move now on the other side. Yet there was nothing there. Zenga stopped, looking around, uneasy, yet not able to spot anything. I concentrated, pretending I was looking through a telescope. I used to do that a lot when I was young, an amateur astronomer, and I'd learned a technique all naked-eye astronomers learn, averted eye vision. The center of your field of view isn't quite as sensitive to certain details, especially low light, texture, and movement, as the area just a little bit off the center. Avert your eye just that tiniest bit and concentrate, and you can suddenly see a tiny bit of detail you missed, banding on Jupiter, a bit of structure in a nebula. And now I saw it, faint, impossible movement, vague outlines so blurred as to be like the shimmer of heat waves above pavement, like the ghostly shapes you might see, floaters inside your own eye. "I think we've been noticed." Zenga still clearly couldn't follow them, but something was making her uneasy. Ruggedo glanced up at me, following my eye movements. "You have spotted them. You follow their motions, even within the rocks which are theirs to traverse as though air. Your perceptions are excellent for a mortal." He continued to walk forward, unconcerned. "Yes, indeed we have. This is far the preferable way of guarding our lands. It is difficult to traverse these mountains, harder still to find the few canyons out of thousands that conceal one of the entrances to the kingdom. And if a mortal finds his way that far, they travel through a deserted land with nothing they can see, and yet somehow they feel as though they are watched, followed, endangered. They return home with tales of the terrible dead land of the gnomes, a place haunted by ghosts, or worse." "And if they actually keep going?" "They will not find an entrance unless we choose to show it to them, and if they bring sufficient men and tools to try to force the issue. Well, you have not come here without the knowledge we can indeed fight. Here, in our homeland, none would be foolish enough to challenge the Nome King." Zenga gasped, and I whirled. Behind us were 12 or more figures, no taller than Ruggedo, in stone and metal armor with glittering spears and sharp swords already out. Zenga had her weapons out as well, but I touched her shoulder gently. "No, we're intruders. They have every right to be cautious." More had appeared in front of us. Ruggedo threw back his hood. Good day to you, Kristalos. The lead gnome, in armor edged with gold and silver, spat contemptuously. Exile. And now I see a traitor, leading these mortals by the secret ways. I seek— Be silent, mortal! Kristalos snapped, and I saw the weapons raised higher. What you seek is of no interest to us whatsoever, and if you do not die in the next few moments, it will be only because we are in a merciful mood, a mood which will not be improved if you argue. This is a matter of the gnomes alone. Oh, Kristalos, the once king of the gnomes said with a cheery smile, as though weapons were not aimed at us all. You are so unwelcoming to one long away from the homeland. And to accuse me of treachery now, that's a harsh and cruel term. And one that I might answer with stone and steel if you insist on using it again. You would dare a challenge of combat? The disbelief on Kristalos' face was plain, and it shifted to pure humor as he laughed. Oh, now, my former king, it seems your exile has at the least made you able to appreciate a jest or two. Ruggedo chuckled with him. Oh, there are many jests I have learned to appreciate, my old friend. But if you do not withdraw that most unfortunate characterization, I will show you a jest too grim for laughter. Whatever position Kristalos held, guard captain, I guessed, or at least some officer fairly high in their ranks, it was certainly not given to the stupid. His laugh cut off abruptly, and he glared, slightly up, into Ruggedo's eyes. Grim, yes, for one who spent his ages on the throne in indolence and tyranny. He studied his former ruler for a moment. Yet exile has at the least hardened your hands, and you carry a war staff. Perhaps you would not embarrass yourself. Very well, I withdraw, with reservations, that characterization. Explain yourself then, exile. Ruggedo gestured to us. These mortals seek an audience with the king. They do so not for crass reasons of business, nor from idle impulse, but for reasons good and sufficient, I think, to justify the risk. I have come here to guide them through the maze, past the enchantments that would mislead or conceal. Think you I do not know what I risk? A tyrant, yes, a bully, a loud and arbitrary monarch, yes, all of these I was, but not an utter fool, nor one easily swayed. Would I come here, perhaps to my death, for reasons inadequate to the risk? Kristalos turned his spear shaft idly between his fingers, obviously thinking. He glanced at me finally. Very well, mortal. What is it you seek? As he says, an audience with King Calico. My reasons are ones I hope he will find compelling. I think he will. The gaze switched to Zenga. And you? I travel with Lord Erik to assist him and support him. Do you? The tone was neutral, but I noticed his eyes shifting their gaze across her clothing, armor, weapons, and I suspected he recognized the origin of some of our equipment. Finally he shrugged. So be it, then. The king has had little entertainment of late, and whatever your fate will be, it is sure to keep him, and possibly us, amused. We shall leave the decision of whether it will be something you find amusing to him. Decision made, Kristalos turned and had his men march with us, ahead and behind. Now we didn't have much choice but to follow him, as the ones behind made clear. We marched nearly another mile over an increasingly steep path, and abruptly Kristalos' men took a right-angle turn and walked straight into the rock wall. I supposed they could be setting up a crude practical joke to have me try to follow them and end up smacking into solid rock, but I figured I didn't have all that much dignity to lose, and I'd gain some by not flinching, if it wasn't a joke. I turned and walked toward the cliff at the same point they had. It wasn't a joke. The rock gave before me like a curtain of rippling mist, and abruptly I was in a high vaulted corridor with walls of polished stone, lit by blazing gems set in the walls, with a sparkle of every color imaginable flickering from the walls with every step. "Whoa!" I said in my best Cuno voice. "An impressive piece of work, yes," Ruggedo said from beside me. Zenga's mouth was half open. "It's beautiful." "Did you expect rough, rocky caverns and smoky torches?" Cristallo's voice was edged with faint scorn. "Torches, perhaps not, given the rock light we have seen, but it was always said the gnomes lived with rock in its native state." "In many areas, yes. Yet this is close to the heart of the mountains, the castle beneath the ground," Ruggedo said. "And here we show the extent of our artistry to any who may come. Even Queen Ozma herself could boast no more magnificent a home than our ruler, and this is nothing but simple truth." As we were led inward through cavern after increasingly dazzling cavern, I was forced to agree. The Emerald City, no matter how great, would be hard-pressed to beat the awesome yet very delicate constructions of crystal and gems and gold that were a part of every wall, worked through the very floors and ceilings of the heart of the mountains. Finally we reached an immense set of doors of hand-beaten gold and platinum and inlaid with 1,000 gems, only half of which I thought I could name. The guards at either side of the doors started a bit as they caught sight of our little party, but bowed and opened the doors at Cristallo's gesture. I took a deep breath as we stepped forward. Here I go again. The throne hall of the Nome King was a perfectly circular room, startlingly simple in many ways compared to the increasingly fanciful and ornate caverns preceding. The roof rose to a perfect polished dome of flawless agate, rippled and dendritic patterns making a natural ornamentation that no artisan could have enhanced. The walls were carved from the living rock, columns supporting the perimeter. 8 sets of doors led into, or out of, the throne hall, and in the very center was the throne. Cast or forged of solid gold and set with every gem known to the gnomes, it drew and held the eye, and shone with a light of its own, a light that limned and made darker and more mysterious and impressive the figure seated there. That figure suddenly leaned forward. "Ruggedo?" Cristallos and his men stepped aside, leaving an open aisle towards the throne. Ruggedo moved forward, stopping near the base of the throne. "It has been a long time, Calico." "Not nearly forever, which was the term of your exile, Ruggedo," answered King Calico, but his tone was more curious than angry, and a slight smile was visible on his wrinkled, beardless face. "How fare you these days?" "Aside from my current precarious position, well enough, old friend." He turned and gestured us forward. "It is really to these mortals you should be speaking, however. My defense from being given the death of cuts or thrown into the pit, or whatever your favored punishment may be in these times, rests on their mission being sufficiently interesting." "Indeed." Calico transferred his attention to me, eyes gray as granite, studying me carefully. "Then tell us, mortal, of your mission." I said nothing. I simply drew forth the jewel, and once more it painted in ethereal, transcendent color the shining glory of the rainbow across the room in which I stood, its celestial beauty momentarily making even the Nome King's throne look cheap and tawdry, a dime-store toy next to the painting of a master. Calico sat frozen, still as the stone of his realm, for a long moment. Then he gestured imperiously, and the guards, Cristallos, his men, and all the others which had been stationed around the room, left, emptying the room and leaving the 3 of us alone with the king. Then Calico chuckled. "Now you most certainly have my undivided attention, mortal. The Rainbow Lord begins his move, as all have hoped and feared for centuries. But the usurpers are hardly unaware that he has intended to act against them, and may already have realized he has begun. Who are you, and what is it you seek, and why should I grant it? I am Erik Medon, of what you call the mortal world. This is Zenga, who has accompanied me from Gilgad to support me as well as to assist in protecting me. Calico raised one snowy eyebrow. So Gilgad has aligned itself with you. I confess to some surprise. So, you come to me not merely as the emissary of the Rainbow Kingdom, but another more earthly land. And you have convinced my old king to assist you. These, I admit, speak well to who you are, and that you may have something of interest to my kingdom. Speak on, then. What do you seek of us? Two things, Your Highness. First, I am not merely from the mortal world. I am, in your terms, a true mortal. Calico sucked in his breath. Indeed, a true mortal. That in itself explains many things. But continue. Unfortunately, while this gives me many advantages, my allies of the rainbow were and are fairies of the sky. Their armor, Calico laughed, a tenor laugh which, I was glad to hear, had real humor and little malice in it, is forged of moonbeams and fantasy, material mighty against spells and magic-forged weapons, and likely to shatter like glass when you extend yourself. Oh, now I see your first request, and it is a wise thought that brings you to us. Indeed, we could forge for you armor and weapons that would let you wield your strength to the fullest without breaking, and yet would still ward off many spells and weapons mundane and enchanted both. It is possible we would do this for you, perhaps merely for the asking, perhaps not. And second, what else do you ask of us? Your lives, your fortunes, and your sacred honor, I answered with a challenging grin. Calico set his jaw the way someone would when confronting something they've long been expecting and dreading. You mean an alliance of arms? I quoted from some of the founders of my own country, King Calico, and I did not do it idly. Here, today, you are free. I do not think you expect the usurpers will stay always on the other side of that desert. Perhaps you have told yourself you can remain neutral, safe here in your fortress because they would not risk challenging you here. Maybe you are right. But they have Fairy of the Earth in their own service, and they would not leave so mighty a potential foe unmolested, if the rest of Fairy were in their power. You may be the last to fall, but fall you will, I think. Perhaps. He leaned back in his throne, considering. But perhaps not. I have many legions of warriors, perhaps more than if they converted all of Oz to their armies, and this they would not do, for they wish to rule a fruitful country, not a barren wasteland. And my artisans have not been idle in these centuries. Engines of destruction we've designed and built such as have never been seen in all of Fairy. And still these would be far better employed at a time of your choosing with a powerful ally, or more than one. A nod, acknowledging my point. As you say, but perhaps better employed as a threat suspected and too dangerous to discover, leaving us entirely free. He shook his head, then looked to Ruggedo. You have escorted them here, and I agree your actions were justified, Ruggedo. You may leave freely. I even give you leave to renew your supplies before you go. Ruggedo bowed. You are kind and generous as always behind your prickly exterior, Calico. Yet I cannot leave, for I have taken an oath to stand by this man's side even to the very end of his quest. That got Calico's attention, possibly even more than everything that had gone before. Finally, after staring at us for several seconds, he spoke. So, you come having forged not one alliance, but two, the second of which I would not have believed, but I hear the truth in your voice, my old king. Little power there may be in the end analysis in that alliance, To have accomplished it at all is astonishing, given the Ruggedo I knew. Calico rose from the throne and walked down the steps, carrying the huge scepter with the single fist-sized ruby that was a symbol of the Nome King. I agree that if your position is as strong as it could be, it may be in my interest to support you now rather than wait to the end. But I could also simply bide my time, perhaps strike afterward when both sides have weakened each other. I need to think on this, and, I believe, I need to see exactly what sort of a man you are, Erik Medon. He clapped his hands and several guards entered instantly. Take our guests to the Crystal Suite and house them there. He turned back to me. I will think on what you have said. And you, Erik Medon, I shall test in my own way, in my own time. How you deal with these tests will do much to make my decision. I bowed. It was clear this was not an offer, it was an order, really. As you will, King Calico. We were led through a maze of corridors to finally arrive at the Crystal Suite. A quite comfortable set of 6 generally round rooms ornamented with natural crystals of quartz, tourmaline, and beryl. The largest was a central room that could serve as a living or meeting room and a dining area. The other rooms branched off from that central room. If you were standing looking in from the main entrance, there were 2 doors on your left, 2 on your right, and 1 straight ahead. The latter was basically the bathroom, and the 2 on each side were bedrooms. Zenga took one of the ones on the right, and Ruggedo and I took those on the left. After putting our meager gear in our chosen rooms, we returned to the central area to find the table already laden with food for all 3 of us. Odd mineralized concoctions for Ruggedo for the most part, while an assortment of more normal human food was available for Zenga and me. Ruggedo nodded to me as we sat down. Well enough done, Lord Erik. But you realize he does mean to test you, and test you as hard as though you were a weapon whose temper was not known. Yes, and I suspect I know part of how this is going to go down, too. Go down? Oh, you mean you have a guess as to exactly how the tests will proceed? Exactly? Maybe not, but I have a guess as to the general form. What about Zenga? Ruggedo shrugged. He seemed exclusively focused on you, accepting her as a political representative and a protector from more mundane threats. You are the key. I doubt he will be testing her directly. He would not bother with me, of course. He knows, or thinks he knows, my capabilities very well. Zenga shook her head. I don't like the idea of him doing some kind of unspecified and possibly lethal tests on you, Lord Erik. Perhaps I should stay in your room just in case. No! That sounded too hasty. No, Zenga, I think we have to follow this through by their rules. I didn't know why a mental red danger flag popped up at her suggestion. We'd been sleeping within an arm's length or 2 every night out in the wilderness. But this was a bedroom with, as I had noted, a very large and comfortable bed in each room. Not the outdoors, not roughing it, and the idea of Zenga combined with bedroom somehow seemed like a very bad idea because it also sounded like a terribly good idea. You know, I'm not a teenager anymore, so why the hell haven't my hormonal issues gone away? She still looked dubious, but acquiesced after realizing I was serious. This caused me to give an internal sigh of relief, not unmixed with another bit of instinctive, "What's wrong with you?" kicking. It had been a long day, and after a few more exchanges, we agreed it was time to get some rest. I made sure to lock my door, then lay down in the first real bed I'd slept in since we left Gilgad. Sometime in the middle of the night, I came half awake with a slight dizzy sensation. There was a faint scraping noise, and the feeling that things were shifting, but it stopped almost before I really registered it. Nonetheless, I grinned. One more guess confirmed. The grin faded. Now, I just have to live through it.